The air outside smelled like winter rain, but inside the tiny one-bedroom apartment, the silence felt heavier than any storm. The little girl sat on the old sofa, hugging her sketchbook, watching her mother stare blankly at a cracked phone screen where a message from a stranger waited. A blind date, her first chance in years. But her mother wasn't moving. She looked exhausted, worn down from another 12-hour shift, her eyes carrying the quiet ache of someone who had learned to survive disappointment, but no longer dared to hope for better. Then the little girl suddenly scrambled off the sofa, grabbed her mom's hand with all her tiny strength, and pulled her toward the door as if her world depended on it. That's when she said it, the words that changed everything. "Mom, let's go. If you believe in second chances, in kindness, and in stories where broken hearts find healing again, please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring more heart-touching stories to life." The single mother, Laura, felt her breath catch. Her daughter, Arya, only 6 years old, looked up at her with a determination that did not belong in someone so small. Laura wanted to explain that this was silly, that people like her didn't get fairy tale endings, that blind dates were for people who had time and energy, not for tired mothers juggling bills and survival. But Arya tugged harder, insisting through her eyes alone, and Laura found herself giving in. Maybe not for hope, but for the way her daughter still believed in magic. She changed into a simple dress, the only thing she owned that wasn't stained or faded. The fabric clung slightly to her thin frame, and she stared at her reflection for a long moment before sighing. She didn't look like someone a man would choose, but she forced herself forward because Arya needed to see her at least try. The cafe was warm, decorated in golden colors, filled with soft evening lights. Laura felt out of place, almost like she had entered a world she didn't belong to. She looked around nervously, holding Arya's hand tightly. She had been told the man's name was Daniel, but she had not seen a photo. It didn't matter. She wasn't expecting anything. Maybe he wouldn't even show up. She was used to people not choosing her. But Arya suddenly pointed to the far side of the cafe, where a tall man stood by the window with a little boy sitting beside him. And in that moment, Laura realized something unexpected. He was a single dad too. Daniel looked like someone pulled from another world, clean-cut, tall, wearing a beautifully tailored coat that whispered wealth without him trying. His eyes were a deep, stormy gray, tired but alert, and his expensive watch caught the light. He didn't look like someone who would struggle the way she did, but his little boy was leaning into him, clutching his sleeve the same way Arya held her hand. The two children made eye contact, as if drawn to each other by some invisible thread. Laura felt her heart stumble, surprised. She wanted to turn away, back out, escape. But Arya pulled her again, whispering with her eyes alone that this was exactly where they needed to be. So she went forward, slowly, almost afraid of disrupting the fragile beauty of that scene, a powerful, polished man, and the child who softened him. As soon as Daniel noticed them, something shifted in his posture. He straightened, a flicker of nervousness appearing in his eyes. He looked at Laura with a kind of stunned recognition, as though he had been expecting someone different, but found someone he couldn't look away from. He reached out gently to greet her, and his voice carried the subtle heaviness of someone living two lives, one for the world and one for the child he loved more than anything. The first minutes were awkward. Laura felt painfully aware of every flaw she carried, her cheap dress, her tired eyes, her rough hands from cleaning jobs. Next to him, she felt invisible, like the universe had played a joke by putting them in the same room. But Daniel didn't look away. He asked about her work, not out of politeness, but genuine curiosity. She tried to keep her answers short. She didn't want to look desperate or pitiful. Still, he listened carefully, noticing the strength hidden under her exhaustion. Their two children, Arya and Ethan, quickly became the glue pulling the adults together. They traded crayons from the cafe's play basket, shared giggles, and leaned into each other as though they'd known each other forever. Watching them, Laura and Daniel found themselves talking more freely, softly unraveling pieces of their lives. Laura learned that Daniel wasn't just a dad. He was the CEO of a rising tech company, a man under constant pressure, always traveling, always responsible for hundreds of employees. But his wife had left 2 years ago, unable to handle the weight of their life, leaving him with their son and a gaping wound he hid under expensive suits. Laura's story was simpler but sadder in its own way. She had been left too abandoned when she became pregnant, surviving alone ever since. There were no luxurious offices or corporate battles in her world, just bills, shifts, rent, and fear. But Daniel didn't pity her. He looked at her as if he saw every silent battle she had fought and admired her for surviving them. Then something unexpected happened. When the children asked for a cookie and the cafe employee mistakenly said the last one had already been taken, Ethan's face crumpled. He was sensitive, Daniel explained quietly, a child who had been wounded by abandonment even though he didn't understand it. Daniel tried to comfort him, but the boy curled inward, overwhelmed. Before Laura could think, Arya walked over to Ethan without hesitation and gently placed her own cookie, her only treat, into his tiny hands. Her movements were soft, deliberate, filled with a kindness that only children carried naturally. Ethan looked up at her, confused at first, then grateful. Daniel watched, the scene with widened eyes, stunned by the depth of compassion in such a small girl. That was when Laura noticed the change in him. Something inside Daniel cracked open, a wall he had kept high for too long. He watched Arya not as a stranger's child, but as someone who reminded him of everything good he had nearly forgotten: innocence, kindness, hope. And he looked at Laura differently now, too. Not as a woman who didn't belong in his world, but as the mother who had raised a child capable of giving away her only happiness without being asked. He saw her strength, her softness, her scars, and the extraordinary love she had poured into her daughter, despite having so little. The conversation deepened, stretched, and warmed. Hours passed without them noticing. The cafe emptied, the night thickened outside, and still they remained. It was the longest, most peaceful evening either had experienced in years. But life, Laura knew, always reminded you of reality. When the bill arrived, she felt herself stiffen. She reached instinctively for her small wallet, embarrassed at the thought of him paying. But Daniel gently placed his hand over the bill, shaking his head with a quiet insistence. It was not arrogance, it was respect, a silent "I want to." Walking home, Laura felt wary. People like her didn't get moments like this. They certainly didn't get men like him. But Arya skipped beside her, glowing from the warmth of the evening, her small heart full of simple certainty. Children didn't know about class or status or heartbreak. They simply knew when something felt right. The next morning, Laura expected the magic to disappear. She told herself the blind date was probably a one-time kindness, a rare moment of connection in a world merciless to single parents. Daniel would return to his wealthy circles, his busy world, his polished life. She would return to hers, and that was okay. At least Arya had enjoyed herself. But then her phone buzzed. Daniel had messaged, not with charm, not with empty words, but with something real, something simple, something that made Laura sit down on her bed because her legs suddenly felt weak. He wanted to see them again. He wanted to take the kids to the park. He wanted to make time despite a world that always demanded more of him. Weeks passed and the fragile thread between them thickened. Their lives, once worlds apart, slowly wove together. Daniel found joy in simple things he had forgotten existed: street food, playing tag with the kids, laughing without checking his watch. Laura rediscovered parts of herself she thought were gone forever: softness, trust, the belief that maybe life had not forgotten her after all. Ethan grew braver with Arya by his side, and Arya felt protected in a way she had never known. But the world wasn't ready to accept them easily. Some of Daniel's board members whispered behind his back, questioning why a CEO was spending so much time with a poor single mother. A few of Laura's coworkers warned her that rich men never stayed. And Laura herself battled with fear, terrified that one day Daniel would realize she was not enough. Daniel fought his own demons too, afraid that opening his heart again would only lead to disappointment. Yet in every moment of doubt, one thing held them together: their children, who had begun to love each other like siblings, who saw beauty in their connection long before the adults dared admit it. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of gold, Daniel stood outside Laura's apartment with a bouquet of simple wildflowers. Not roses, Not something expensive, something real, something that matched her. He took a shaky breath, gathering courage he had not needed in boardrooms or corporate battles, because this love, vulnerability, family, was far scarier than any business decision. When Lara opened the door, her eyes tired but warm, he felt his heart settle into place as though it had been wandering for years and finally found home. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep creating beautiful emotional stories for you. Before we end, special request, comment below, what was your favorite moment in this story? The wind blew softly as Daniel stepped closer, his voice unsteady but filled with truth. He told her that he didn't care about the whispers, the differences, or the shadows of their pasts. He only cared about the way she made his world make sense again. He cared about the way Arya and Ethan completed each other. He cared about the possibility of building something extraordinary out of two broken families who deserved a second chance. In that moment, Lara felt all her walls slowly fall. Not because Daniel was a CEO, not because he offered money or comfort, but because he offered something she had forgotten she deserved: love that didn't judge, didn't compare, didn't require perfection. Just presence, just honesty, just heart. As their children ran around them laughing, creating chaos under the fading sunlight, Lara finally allowed herself to imagine a future she had never dared to dream of. A future where she wasn't alone. A future where Arya had a brother. A future where Daniel had a partner who saw the man behind the suit. A future where love wasn't a luxury but a home they built together brick by fragile brick. And so, what began with a little girl tugging her mother's hand toward an uncertain blind date became the moment two families found healing, hope, and a love that grew quietly, beautifully, and undeniably. Because sometimes, fate doesn't knock. Sometimes, it is pulled gently by the hand of a child who simply believes that love deserves a chance.